Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into 5 must-draft wide receivers for your 2023 fantasy football drafts. But before we can get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my top 5 must-draft wide receivers for the 2023 fantasy football season. We begin with my first must-draft wide receiver, Garrett Wilson of the New York Jumbo Jets, current underdog ADP wide receiver 8 at pick 12.8. I will note in a lot of redraft leagues, he's going to go in the middle of the second round to the late second round, unless, of course, there's a Jets fan that really wants him, or a wide receiver heavy draft where he goes early on in the second round. Last year was the wide receiver 19.5 PPR and the wide receiver 31.5 PPR points per game, tied with Hollywood Brown and now his teammate Mecole Hardman, formerly of the Chiefs. Wide receiver 24.5 PPR points per game, though, when playing 60+% of the snaps, which is a 14 game sample size for Wilson. He played in all 17 games last season as a rookie, commanding 147 targets, 8.6 per game, number 6 at wide receiver. He had 83 receptions, 4.9 per game, number 16, 1,103 receiving yards, 64.9 per game, number 14 at wide receiver, and 4 total touchdowns, 37th at wide receiver. Despite the fact that the combination of Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder were playing quarterback for the team with Zach Wilson, Magic Mike White, and Joe Flacco, Garrett Wilson was a complete and utter beast. He was weighed down to the bottom of the ocean, and yet Garrett Wilson was still able to swim up and keep his head above the water. Again, he had 147 targets as a rookie. That is almost 9 targets per game. Imagine the numbers that Garrett Wilson could have put up if his quarterback, or any of the quarterbacks that they had, were above the competent level. Garrett Wilson with a normal quarterback, if Garrett Wilson had Kirk Cousins, he could have been a top 15, top 12 wide receiver in fantasy football in his rookie year. He had 229 route wins, ranking 19th at wide receiver, and the competition in New York for the Jets with Garrett Wilson is incredibly bad, if I'm being honest with you. Sure, Allen Lazard is going to have a couple of flash games. You're going to be like, oh, I want to draft, or I want to pick up Allen Lazard, and then you pick him up and he takes a shit on your chest and drops like 3 fantasy points, right? We all know the Allen Lazard experience. It's the same exact experience as Mecole Hardman, who is on the team now from the Kansas City Chiefs, right? He has one big game and then shits the bed 3 games straight, and then once you finally have the balls to cut him, he has a great game again. They got Corey Davis, and they have old man Randall Cobb, the corpse of Randall Cobb. So now Garrett Wilson enters the year as the clear alpha wide receiver, led by the offense with Aaron Rodgers. Now, I know Aaron Rodgers last year wasn't the same Aaron Rodgers that was hitting the discount double check, winning back-to-back Michael Jordan 96-97 MVPs. And I don't expect Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career to go back to being like a top 3, maybe even the best quarterback in the NFL. But for Garrett Wilson to succeed in fantasy football, Aaron Rodgers doesn't need to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He just has to not be a complete and utter fucking scrub like Zach Wilson, like Magic Mike White, or like Cool Joe Flacco. So again, while earlier on in the offseason, I started to worry about Garrett Wilson, and I do kind of worry about the fact that this team really feels like they're going to get really hyped up and maybe not be as good as a lot of people think they will be. At the end of the day, Garrett Wilson is going to be force-fed the ball in this Jets offense. We've already seen a million clips out of training camp of Garrett Wilson snagging the ball in the end zone. He's getting fed the ball by Rodgers. It appears him and Rodgers have more chemistry, and his ADP ADP is going to continue to rise because this team is on Hard Knocks, and I assume Garrett Wilson is going to be a main character, a main part of this show, and that is going to cause people to like him, thus his ADP moving up. Next up, we got my guy of my Miami Dolphins, Jaylen Waddle away, waddle, till the very next day, bump, bada bum, of the Miami Dolphins, underdog ADP, wide receiver 11 at pick 16.4. Now, Jaylen Waddle, when I see him at the end of the second round, I would cut my fucking arm off to draft this guy like I'm in the Saw film. I genuinely think that Jaylen Waddle has top 5 wide receiver upside this year. I think Jaylen Waddle might mess around and outscore Tyreek Hill this season. Now, all of this upside is locked in the box of Tua Tagovailoa. If Tua Tagovailoa is able to play all 17 games or 16 games, whatever, play most of the games at least, then Jaylen Waddle's upside is legitimately top 5. But if Tua isn't able to go, sure, I think Mike White's a step up over Skylar Thompson or Teddy Bridgewater. It's not going to be as good as with Tua. Last year, he was the wide receiver 7.5 PPR and the wide receiver 13.5 PPR points per game, finishing the season with 17 games played, 116 targets, 6.8 per game, number 24, 75 receptions, 4.4 per game, number 23, 1,356 receiving yards, 79.8 per game, number 7, and 8 total touchdowns, number 11 at wide receiver. The craziest part is this man scored 8 total touchdowns and didn't score a single touchdown in the 5 games that he played without Tua Tagovailoa last season, and we are going to get into the stats of Jaylen Waddle with versus without Tua Tagovailoa. But first, I want to go over the efficiency stats. This guy was as efficient as it gets at wide receiver. He was 10th in route win rate, 1st in yards per target, 1st in yards per reception, and 3rd in fantasy points per target with 2.23. While it's always fun to watch Jaylen Waddle do a Usain Bolt fucking sprint off the line, run a go route, catch the ball, go for 60 yards, he could literally catch a 3-yard slant and take that thing 99 yards to the house. Jaylen Waddle is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. He just does not get the credit that he deserves because Tyreek Hill is on the same team as him, and Tyreek Hill is a top 3 wide receiver in the National Football League. So to go into the stats with Tua versus without. With Tua, 12 games. Without Tua, 5 games. So on a per game basis, with Tua, Jaylen Waddle was getting 7.3 targets per game. Without him, 5.8. Receptions, 4.7. With Tua, 3.8 without. Receiving yards per game, 89.1 with Tua, 57.4 per game without. 0.7 touchdowns per game with Tua, 0 without. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Tua Tagovailoa is essential to the upside of Jaylen Waddle. And Tua has been working all offseason to fix the fact that his head was smashing up against the ground all the time. Tua's been working on that, and if Tua can stay healthy, you better fucking believe the Miami Dolphins are going to have one of the best offenses in the National Football League. The big play upside of Jaylen Waddle and Tyreek Hill is immense. It is beautiful because there are some drafts, again, I like Jaylen Waddle in the middle or the end of the second round. There are drafts that I have been in where Jaylen Waddle in a regular fantasy league goes in the 3rd round. I think Jaylen Waddle is an incredibly safe investment in fantasy football this season while also having large upside, and knock on wood, we don't root for injuries. If something happened to Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle could literally be the wide receiver number 1 in all of fantasy football this season. If you guys have ended up enjoying thus far, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. My number 3 must-draft wide receiver is Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers, underdog ADP wide receiver 21 at pick 41. He was the wide receiver 34.5 PPR last year and the wide receiver 30.5 PPR points per game, though he was the wide receiver top five in half PPR points per game when playing 60+% of snaps, 7 games. So he had 14 games with 11 starts. His stats are not mouth-watering. His stats aren't amazing. 65 targets, 4.6 per game, number 65. 41 receptions, 2.9 per game, number 64. 611 receiving yards, number 52. Though his touchdowns were extravagant, 9 total touchdowns, 4th at wide receiver. Now, it is important to note that I get why people are scared that Watson is going from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. Even though Rodgers didn't have a great season and Watson had a 7.4 target accuracy, 41st at wide receiver, I get that Jordan Love might not even be the watered down version of Aaron Rodgers that we saw last season in Green Bay. I fully understand that. But when you're looking at the wide receiver room, you see that besides Christian Watson, sure, they have Romeo Doubs, they have Jayden Reed, they have these other guys to be excited about, but none of those guys have performed in the NFL like Christian Watson. Christian Watson is amazing when you throw the ball his way. A 102.5% true catch rate, 7th at wide receiver. Christian Watson is going to be seeing a shit ton of volume this season from Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love is going to be locked on like a heat-seeking missile onto Christian Watson. I get the inherent risk again with Jordan Love. There's a chance that this pick comes flaming down and crashes and burns on earth, right? I fully get that. But when you're drafting Christian Watson, you aren't in the earliest parts of drafts. Now, on Underdog, you might consider it to be early because it's pick number 41. But I will note, on most redraft leagues, he's not going. He's going pick 50, pick 60 sometimes. So where you are taking him, I talk about this a ton, so maybe if you're not new to the channel, you are sick of hearing it, but early on in drafts, I like to wrap the condom around my team, right? Garrett Wilson, Jaylen Waddle, both incredibly safe with amazing upside. Christian Watson is going at the point in the draft where you take the condom off. You start to take the risk. You are going for the upside shot. I understand that if Jordan Love sucks, it's going to be very hard for Christian Watson to succeed. But if you watch the film of Christian Watson, he is a special player. And if Aaron Rodgers was still the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, I think Christian Watson might be going as the wide receiver 16, 17, 18 right now, and he's coming off the board as the wide receiver 21. And I think in a lot of leagues with more casual players, he's going to be going even deeper at the wide receiver position because people are very nervous about Jordan Love. Again, I'm not panicking when it comes to Jordan Love. I think Love is going to be just fine, and I expect great things out of the wide receiver 1 of the Green Bay Packers, Christian Watson, this season. I think anyone who had Christian Watson on their team last season will understand exactly what I'm talking about if you watch the games, just how good this guy was, despite the fact that no one was talking about Christian Watson really entering into the 2022 NFL season. Before we pivot to my must-draft wide receivers 4 and 5, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, if you're brand new to Underdog Fantasy, they are the best place to play best ball fantasy football this summer. If you don't know what best ball is, it's the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft. There's no trades, there's no waivers, and there is no in-season management. So you draft your 18-round team, and that's it. At the end of every single week, Underdog automatically puts your highest scores into your lineups for you. So you can theoretically do hundreds of drafts and potentially come back at the end of the season and won a boatload of money. If you use promo code Notorious, you'll get a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. So you deposit $100, they'll give you an additional $150, an additional $50, $25, an additional $25. Again, promo code Notorious, or click on the link in the video description. They have the biggest best ball contest ever, $25 to enter, Best Ball Mania 4, $3 million to first place, $15 million in total prizes. If you want to just do what would feel more like a normal league, you don't want to join a big tournament, more of a cash game type of thing, then they have those as well. $3 to enter. You versus 11 people. The top 2 places make money. Make sure you guys check that out. Link in the video description. Moving now to my number 4 must-draft wide receiver. We got Michael Pittman Jr., MPJ of the Indianapolis Colts. Current Underdog ADP wide receiver 34 at pick 67.6. Michael Pittman is a very polarizing player for a lot of fantasy football players. Some people think that Michael Pittman Jr. is going to smash this season, that his ADP at wide receiver 34 is fucking laughable, like me. I love Michael Pittman, but the other half of people probably think Michael Pittman stinks out loud. They drafted him last year, and while he had the targets, had the receptions, didn't get the receiving yards, didn't get the receiving touchdowns, so they are out on him in 2023. He was the wide receiver 23.5 PPR and the wide receiver 29.5 PPR points per game, playing 16 games, having 141 targets, 8.8 per game, number 11. 99 receptions, 6.2 per game, number 8. 925 receiving yards, 57.8 per game, number 24. And 4 total touchdowns, 37th at wide receiver. So despite the fact that he got 140 fucking targets, which is amazing, right? A target hog in this Colts offense, he did not eclipse 100 receptions and did not eclipse 1,000 receiving yards. And he only scored 4 touchdowns. Nick, why is that? Very simple. The Colts as a whole internally combusted. The Colts were an offense that I was kind of in on. I thought, Matt Ryan wasn't the best in 2021, but I think he's a new team. He got the Falcons stink off of him. He's going to be great in Indy. He's going to be decent. And he sucked. The offensive line sucked. Not as good as what we thought they would be. Jonathan Taylor gets hurt and sucks. Their head coach, Frank Reich, sucks. So he gets fired. They bring in Jeff Saturday, now fired. So everything goes wrong. Everything for the offense is a complete and utter disaster. Michael Pittman goes from Carson Wentz to Matt fucking Ryan. It's bad. So he doesn't perform that well. And then at some point in the season, Sam Ehlinger, Texas legend, starts playing quarterback for the team. So again, every single thing went wrong. But he still got a lot of targets, got a lot of receptions. The receiving yards and touchdowns could use more work. But things like that will come when you're efficient. 2nd in total route wins, 7th in route win rate, and 17th in contested catch rate. If you look at the room of other weapons for the Indianapolis Colts, it's like a fucking Nerf gun collection, right? It's not this army collection like when you're playing GTA, you can grab an RPG, a grenade launcher, you can grab an AK, you can grab an M4A1, you can grab everything, pistols, everything, right? This was a Nerf room at wide receiver, and it still is. Michael Pittman, the head honcho. Then they've got Josh Downs. They've got Alec Pierce. They've got Jelani Woods. Besides Jonathan Taylor, there isn't a lot of legit weapons there. And they got a head coach in Shane Steichen, who comes from the Philadelphia Eagles. They draft Anthony Richardson. Now, I'm not saying Anthony Richardson is the second coming of Tua Tagovailoa, the most accurate quarterback in the NFL, according to Tyreek Hill. Sure, but he's confident in throwing the deep ball. He's going to throw it deep. Let that fucker fly. That's what he's going to do. And he's going to be better than the quarterbacks that we saw last year, even if you don't believe in Anthony Richardson. He's going to be better than what we saw last season. So it does not take some mental gymnastics to figure out that Michael Pittman, the clear wide receiver one in Indianapolis, with an upgraded quarterback who already commanded a bunch of targets, got a bunch of receptions, going to be better in 2023. I have been drafting Michael Pittman like it's my job. Every single time I see him, I click the draft button. I need Michael Pittman on my teams. I think this guy has top 12 upside. You can get him as the wide receiver 34. And sometimes even later, because people don't want to draft him because the Colts sucked last year, and what happened in 2022 is going to happen again, right? Same reason people are out on Deontay Johnson. All the targets are there, but he doesn't score enough. He didn't score any touchdowns. Don't overthink these target volume players. Volume is so important in fantasy football. Moving now to my must-draft player, must-draft wide receiver, numero 5, Jahan Dotson of the Washington left hands up. Who are we? The Commanders. Underdog ADP, wide receiver 36, pick 73.2. So last year, they had Wentz and they had Heineke. Wentz started off the season looking like prime Patrick Mahomes, finished the season with pie on his face. He was terrible. Heineke, not the best either. So we got to get a full season of either Sam Howell, or get it, Howell, like a fucking wolf, or Jacoby Brissett. Sam Howell looked like also Patrick Mahomes in that one game he started last year against Dallas. Who knows how things are going to go? They bring in offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy, which I think will help out the offense a ton with Riverboat Ron Rivera. So Sam Howell or Brissett, based upon how Brissett performed last year, should be fine for Dotson. I get it. Dotson, not the best stats. Wide receiver, 50.5 PPR, 38.5 PPR points per game. Played in 12 games, but he only had 10 starts, 61 targets, 5.1 per game. Number 70, he had 35 receptions, 2.9 per game. Number 77, 523 receiving yards, 43.6 per game. Number 63, 7 total touchdowns, 14th. Again, the quarterback play was awful. Another scenario where the quarterback really let the guy down, right? Dotson was getting open, making these contested catches, 19th in contested catch rate, 6th in yards per target, 16th in yards per reception. But he has a 6.6 target accuracy ranking, 91st at wide receiver. But what you will see when you either rewatch the games or you throw up the stat sheet, you can see that he did have some spike weeks during the season, but he finished the season incredibly strong. Finished hard. Paint. With 2 top 12 finishes and 6 top 25 finishes. But he has the Commanders stink on him. He has the Sam Howell, the Jacoby Brissett fucking skunk stink on him. Again, big play guy. A first round NFL draft pick in 2022. Not long ago, last year. Jahan Dotson has proven that he command amount of targets, good things with them. As long as the quarterback can find and be somewhat remotely fucking accurate towards Jahan Dotson, he's going to have a good season. So, again, while I've talked about Terry McLaurin, some people say, Nick, how can you like McLaurin and Dotson? Well, guess what? I like Jaylen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I like Higgins, and I like Jamar Chase. I like Justin Jefferson, and I like Jordan Addison. I like Terry McLaurin, and I like Jahan Dotson. I think the spike games towards the end of the season are showing me that this guy has the it factor. He has what it takes to command targets in the NFL. And again, the other weapons outside of Terry and Jahan Dotson, things get scary, right? Curtis fucking Samuel. Logan Thomas. How many games? Is he going to stay healthy? Is he going to play 3 games? I like Gibson. I like the other running back, Brian Robinson. But hey, I think Jahan Dotson is in a good spot here. I like where he's going in drafts, and I feel pretty confident in the upside that he possesses, as well as those spike game performances, right? He might not be uber consistent this season. I think he's going to be a lot more consistent, but you do have that luck box chance of him hanging a top 12 performance on the defense, and you having a great day. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying today's video, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below as well as hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Again, make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy. Link in the video description. I love you guys all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.